Her sister wants to take away her biological daughter, but she doesn't dare to say no, because she was the one who approached her sister, begging her to use witchcraft to cure her infertility. Her sister warned her that the price would be steep, but even that didn't change her mind, now that she has her own child. According to their agreement, every firstborn son of the family from now on will belong to her sister. Esther vows that she will reclaim her witchcraft and fight against her sister.
You knew the bargain you made. And should you defy me, then I will take all your children, including little Finn, even unborn Elijah.
But her daughter Freya disappears from her sight. Rebecca is trapped in a witch's body by Cole's prank when a strange girl recognizes her.
You're the sister, Rebecca.
The stranger is none other than Cassie, the harvest witch previously possessed by Esther. Rebecca asks Cassie how she can escape, but Cassie tells her that no living person has ever left this place. They head downstairs. Cassie explains to Rebecca that ever since Klaus imprisoned 2 witches here until they died, the witches' spirits have been attracting girls who were harmed by witchcraft. Some of the warlocks who were imprisoned here for practicing dark magic have become the actual leaders. Rebecca insists that if she can find a way to send out a distress signal, her brothers will definitely come to rescue her. Unaware of Rebecca's situation, her brothers decide to split up. Elijah and Camille take Hope and leave the French Quarter. Klaus and Hayley stay behind to deal with Finn. But Finn isn't idle either. Michael frees him from his coffin, and the two decide to join forces against Klaus. Finn says that he can take advantage of his father's immense power. Werewolves and vampires gathered together to negotiate peace for Hayley and Jackson's wedding. Marcel declared that he would lead the vampires to ensure the wedding proceeded safely and on time, but the werewolves had to promise peaceful coexistence after the ceremony. Finn suddenly showed up uninvited, intent on finding out the whereabouts of his mother, but he came up empty-handed. In a fit of rage, Finn pressed his hand against the wall, causing the entire house to shake violently. The crowd was bewildered. Gia attempted to attack Finn but was burned by an invisible barrier. Finn cast a spell that trapped all the werewolves and vampires inside the house, then turned and left with a smug grin. Josh and Aiden finally found a moment to be alone.
As long as we're trapped here in the witch bubble of doom, might as well make the most of it. Come on, someone might come up. So, I don't really care if anyone sees me making out with my boyfriend.
Aiden admitted that the werewolf clan's hatred for vampires ran deeper than Josh had imagined, and that his pack neither knew about nor would accept their relationship. Suddenly, Josh felt unwell, and as he stared at Aiden's neck, he was overwhelmed by a bloodthirsty desire. It turned out to be the effect of Finn's spell. The hunger almost consumed Josh, and he was afraid to even be with Aiden. He went to Marcel and told him something was wrong, but as Finn's spell took full effect, Gia and Marcel were also overtaken by an unexpected wave of hunger. Klaus walked in, complaining that the vampires in the house suddenly seemed eager to feast, but he quickly realized who was behind it all. Being the only witch in the house, Cole calls Davina and they chant a spell together across the barrier, palm to palm, but soon invisible magic bounces them off each other. They realize that Finn must have drawn on some powerful energy. Little did they know, the ever-dutiful Finn had already turned Michael into a sacrificial offering. Elijah called Rebecca, only to discover that the girl who was supposed to be used as a vessel was still herself. With Rebecca's soul nowhere to be found, he immediately informed Klaus of this unexpected development. Seeing the urgency of the situation, Klaus called Finn and revealed their mother's location. Finn, however, insisted he would only lift the spell on the house once he confirmed his mother was unharmed. Rebecca, sending out a distress signal, joined Cassie in chanting a spell to try and relay the message to her brothers, but the spell was quickly interrupted by a witch pushing through the door, so they had to get up and leave the room. Unbeknownst to them, the neatly arranged words behind them were suddenly disrupted by an invisible force. Finn blasted through the sealed crypt and finally found his mother, only to discover that she had become a vampire. He furiously accused her of abandoning her principles, but Esther simply replied that she was just too hungry.
It was your morality, Mother, your conviction that awed me. That's why I stood by you. That's why I fought for you!
Finn wastes no time in turning his mother into a sacrifice. Cole suggested that he and Davina could combine their powers to create a spell that would interrupt Finn's barrier for 60 seconds, but it would cause all magical items in the house to lose their power. The vampire's daylight rings would stop working. However, The hungry vampires and agitated werewolves were already too far gone to coexist peacefully until sunset. Cole and Davina decided to cast a spell to send the werewolves outside. As they prepared the spell, the werewolves and vampires in the house had already started to clash. A wooden stake in a werewolf's hand first grazed Aiden's arm, and the sight of the scarlet blood provoked the starving vampires. Two vampires lunged at Aiden, knocking him to the ground. Seeing the danger, Josh snapped one vampire's neck and threw the other aside, but the bloodthirsty and hungry Josh almost lost control when he saw his lover's bleeding arm. Klaus rushed forward and snapped Josh out of it just in time. Davina and Cole resumed chanting, their voices steady and focused. Suddenly, the candles on the floor blew out, and a gust of wind tousled Davina's hair. The spell worked, and Davina's hand passed through the barrier, intertwining fingers with Cole. The werewolves quickly left the house, while the vampires could only hide in the shadows for the time being. Aiden couldn't help but turn back, giving a loving glance at Josh, who was still trapped inside. Klaus suddenly stepped forward and threw Cole, who was trying to leave the house, back inside.
It was a prank. Nothing more than anything you lot have done to me, but I guess it's different when it's one of...
Barrier's back up.
The vampires slowly emerged from the shadows. Rebecca returned to her room, where the letters on the floor had rearranged themselves into another message. A creepy long-haired ghost appeared before Rebecca, causing her to scream in terror before the ghost vanished again. Rebecca followed the ghost's figure up the stairs, where it disappeared in front of a tightly shut door. Rebecca banged on the door with all her might, but it didn't budge. Just as she was about to give up, the door creaked open on its own. Inside was a coffin, and she could vaguely see that it held a woman. Confused, Rebecca left the room, and the door slammed shut behind her. She returned to her room and lay down on the bed. The letters on the floor silently rearranged themselves once more, slowly forming the name of her eldest sister, Freya. Almost simultaneously, all three brothers across different locations suddenly and mysteriously collapsed. The culprit turned out to be their eldest brother, Finn, and the energy source Finn was using came from their own parents. Klaus used a witch's spell to locate Finn, but the next moment he collapsed, unconscious on the ground. Elijah, who was in the middle of a counseling session, suffered the same fate. One moment he was sharing his thoughts, the next he was lying flat on the floor. But the most unfortunate was their younger brother, Cole, who was locked in with a group of hungry vampires. Just as he was about to discipline the vampire in front of him, he suddenly convulsed and fell to the ground, unconscious. This left the three vampires standing there, utterly bewildered. One by one, the three brothers entered the same consciousness space, only to find themselves in a simple, rustic cabin. The walls were adorned with various animal specimens: a noble stag, a cunning fox, and a fierce wolf, each one seemingly a metaphor for their personalities. The mastermind, Finn, arrived fashionably late. Klaus tried to lunge at him, but realizes that his proud the Originals vampire powers have vanished. Cole stepped forward, pleading with his brother to let him go, fearing that his now weak, human body would be torn apart by vampires. Instead of agreeing, Finn maliciously made things worse by causing his nose to bleed. The vampires in the real world quickly reacted to the scent of blood. Eyeing him hungrily, reborn as a witch, Finn decided to eradicate all vampires, imprisoning them in a house and maliciously amplifying their bloodlust and hunger. Tonight was New Orleans' annual festival, with humans parading in the streets. Finn planned to release all the vampires at night, and the starving vampires would attack humans in broad daylight, revealing the vampires' secret to the world. But for his powerful original vampire brothers, Finn intended to unearth their deepest secrets, exploit their weaknesses, and then strike them down. Cole, who had also been reborn as a witch, was not his primary target. After giving Cole a minor punishment, Finn sent his consciousness back to his body. Cole had just regained consciousness when he found himself surrounded by hungry vampires. Just as he was about to be devoured, Marcel swooped in and grabbed him, making a run for it. The two of them took refuge in a small room, where Cole revealed that the vampires would soon be released.
The streets will be jam-packed with people, right outside the gate.
You'll be half crazed with hunger. You'll feed your way through the crowd and that'll be the end of vampires secretly living off the fat of New Orleans.
But Marcel was already slipping into a daze. He had just been bitten by a werewolf, and without Klaus's blood, he would soon meet his end. In his delirium, he saw a comrade from 100 years ago, someone he had fought alongside on the Western Front during World War I. To keep the vampires calm, he chose not to reveal the whole truth. Finn and Klaus were trading accusations, airing each other's dirty laundry. Klaus praised Finn for the bold act of killing their parents and draining all their power by using them as sacrificial offerings, but Finn was quick to expose his brother's savage act of murdering their biological father. He shrewdly pointed out that Ansel must have uncovered some dark secret, which led Klaus to silence him. Finn's sharp reasoning made both Klaus and Elijah uneasy. Night had already fallen, and Marcel was still trying to calm the restless vampires. New Orleans was their shared home, and he urged them to resist their hunger. He had stored a large supply of blood bags by the bayou, enough to satisfy them all. The death knell had already sounded. Marcel reached out his hand to test, and the barrier was gone. The vampires, led by Marcel, slowly walked out. The hungry vampires moved through the crowd like a cat strolling by a fish pond, surrounded by food yet unable to take a bite. If they fed on the blood of the locals, they would be banished from the city. Marcel, racked with pain from the werewolf bite, felt as though he was surrounded by walking desserts, but he still managed to resist the temptation with tremendous willpower. Even in the most resource-scarce battlefields, he had never taken a drop of his comrade's blood, but soon, his strength gave out, and he collapsed. Meanwhile, the original brothers trapped in the alternate dreamscape were still engaged in a deadly game of werewolf. The killer, Finn, was closing in. The two younger brothers struggled to hold their ground. As Finn got closer to the truth, Elijah finally realized the flaw in the spell. If the caster conjures up a symbolic object that doesn't match the prey, then the spell collapses. He looked at his own symbol, the noble stag.
Were I truly noble, brother, I would not have withheld from you a vile deed. One that I, like a coward, allowed Mother to erase from my memory. It was I who killed Tatya.
With Elijah's confession, the spell began to tremble. He knelt before Klaus and begged for forgiveness, but Finn said that this confession only confirmed his nobility, and the spell would not collapse because of it. However, Klaus countered, saying that in reality, Elijah wasn't a noble stag, but a beast just like him.
You, Finn, have remained a boar for centuries, but here is where your true fault lies. You never learnt that the bonds of family far outweigh anything else. Such bonds trump petty jealousies. They overcome ancient feuds, and yes, they are capable of allowing one monster to pardon the great sins of another.
The spell began to tremble and the specimen on the wall began to burn. Finn vanished before his brother's eyes. Elijah and Klaus woke up as well. Klaus stepped out onto the street, which was still bustling and peaceful. The riot he feared hadn't happened. Marcel awoke from his fainting spell, and Gia found the spare vial of Klaus's blood. The vampires have survived the ordeal and are recuperating downstairs. But Finn showed up uninvited. Having failed in his reasoning, he decided to take a different approach. By the time Klaus arrived, the large room was completely empty. Marcel and all the vampires were gone. The witch carelessly ripped the necklace off the girl, unaware of the heavy price she would soon pay for it. Scarface, which quickly faced the consequences. The necklace guided her to the room at the end of the second floor, where the previously closed door suddenly swung open. Curiosity drew Scarface Witch closer, but a mysterious force dragged her inside. Rebecca told Cassie that she found a coffin in the upstairs room, and that the girl inside possessed immense power. They could use that power to escape the house. Little did they know, the girl in the coffin was now sitting right beside them on the floor, happily watching Tom and Jerry. Rebecca pulled out an apple and handed it to the girl before turning to leave. The girl quickly tucks the apple into her pocket, and her face becomes very secretive. The apple in the girl's possession was soon discovered by the overseer, Scarface, which pinned her to the table, demanding to know where she had stolen the apple from. Unable to stand it any longer, Rebecca angrily charged forward, punching Scarface Witch to the ground. Two warlocks quickly reacted and grabbed her. Scarface Witch, enraged, tore off an iron rod and brutally smashed Rebecca's fingers. Rebecca winced in pain, while the girl looked on. Confused by Rebecca's actions, she approached and asked Rebecca why she had helped her.
Maybe I just like the idea of us girls sticking together.
Night fell, and the girl's presence startled Rebecca awake from her dream. The girl asked her why she was locked up here. Rebecca replied that she was in this predicament because of her own brothers. The girl didn't understand why family members would hurt each other, and even Rebecca couldn't answer that. Rebecca walked up to the girl and told her she might have a way to leave this place, and if the girl wanted to join her, She could meet her at the front door in 20 minutes. Rebecca turned and left to meet up with Cassie, only to find her bed empty. Rebecca went to the mysterious room on the second floor, where the once tightly shut door was now ajar. She cautiously pushed it open and stepped inside, only to find an empty coffin and the dead body of Scarface Witch. Cassie appeared in front of Rebecca, her face now marred with 2 scars. She had reported Rebecca to the coven, believing Rebecca was the one who killed Scarface Witch. The witches surrounded Rebecca. She fought back, taking down 2 warlocks, but was soon overpowered by another and collapsed to the floor. Just as the warlock was about to strike, a mysterious force hurled him up to the ceiling. The girl appeared before them, stating that perhaps those who were truly deserving of punishment were the ones trapped in the house, who continued to bully the weak despite their situation. She walked towards Cassie, accusing her of betraying her friends despite possessing great power. Cassie's eyes began to bleed, and the girl's curse made her suffer until she died. The girl helped Rebecca to her feet, holding her injured hand. In an instant, Rebecca's broken fingers were completely healed. The door that had been sealed for a century was easily opened by the girl. Rebecca followed her out of the house where she had been imprisoned for nearly a week. She recognized the girl as the one who had been sleeping in the coffin and asked her why she hadn't revealed herself earlier. The girl replied that she simply wanted to test Rebecca's character. Rebecca finally recognized the girl. She was the eldest sister, Freya, who their mother had said died of the plague 1,000 years ago. Freya walked to the edge of the yard, grasped the fence, and began chanting a spell. The dolls on the fence eerily twisted in direction. After finishing the incantation, she turned to look at Rebecca.
And I expect nothing less than their best behavior.
With a gentle wave of her hand, Freya sent the fence flying. Freya then left alone. Rebecca soon returned to New Orleans, appearing before Klaus in a new form. Klaus couldn't believe his eyes, but he quickly recognized his sister.